Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Those of you who are here with us, those who might still be on the way, they don't get to hear this, and those of you who've joined us virtually, we're grateful that you are part of our community this evening as we have this special experience and encounter with God that's called Shabbat. And we're reminded of the importance of Shabbat as we turn to pages 8 to 11, as Jacob is about to lead us. We're reminded of the importance of Shabbat because God said that this would be his sign, his guarantee that he is our God and we are his people forever. So pages 8 to 11 as we respond.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל עוד היא לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי Shabbat vayinafash. The children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, observing the Sabbath throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever, that in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the seventh day he ceased from work and rested.
Since it is that special privilege that we have of being here together on Shabbat in God's presence, or God present among us, we're now ready to welcome Shabbat as we do traditionally, as we stand facing the door and we respond again as Jacob leads us on pages 14 to 25 with L'chadodi. We are aware of the fact that she is often called the Queen of Days, but she will ultimately announce in the one who's called the King of the Ages, as L'chadodi points forward to.
L'chadodi likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Ishme'anu el hamyuchad. Adonai echad u'shemo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'lithilah. L'chadodi likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. L'chad Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, כי היא מקור הברכה, מראש מקדם נעשוך, סוף מעשה המחשבה תחילה. l'chadodi לקראת כלה, panei Shabbat nekabela. L'chadodi likrat kala, panei Shabbat nekabela. Hi Torah ri, Kiva urich kumi ori. Uri, uri, shir de be'eri, kivod Adonai alahich nigla. Lecha dodi likwat kala, vaneshu badnika bela. Lecha dodi likwat kala, vaneshu badnika bela. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Observe and remember, in a single statement, the unique God caused us to hear his command. He alone is Lord, and his name is unique to his fame and splendor and praise. Together, come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Let's go to meet the Sabbath, for she is the source of blessing from the beginning, anointed from ancient days, though made last, conceived first. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Wake up, your light is come. Arise, shine, awake, awake. Sing a grand song. The glory of God is revealed to you. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath.
Please be seated. Wake, wake, your light has come, which means it's now time to light the Shabbat lights. And I forgot to invite someone to do so, so Celia, would you come and lead us in that as we remember this special day and the special guarantee that Shabbat is as we encounter and experience the God of the universe on this, his special day.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'hadliknei shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart by your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'hayot olagoyim V'natan lanu, Yeshua Mishikeinu, Ha'or Leolam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations and gave us Yeshua, our Messiah, the light of the world. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. And now we pray for that special Shabbat peace, particularly for the people of the Ukraine. As we pray, Avinu Malkeinu, our Father and our King, in these troubled days, we pray for peace in the name of the Prince of Peace, Yeshua, our Messiah. God of grace and mercy, may your protection be upon the Ukrainian people in this time of trial, especially upon the most vulnerable, which includes many Jewish people, as well as countless children and elderly people. Give wisdom and direction to the leaders of Ukraine as they respond to this invasion. Guide other world leaders, especially those in the United States, into ways of responding with appropriate force and decisiveness. May the plans of Russia's leadership be reversed, and may their power and hold over the Russian people be dismantled. As it is written in the Proverbs, the ruler's heart is a stream of water in the hand of a Lord. He turns it wherever he will. So may you in your mercy hold back the forces of chaos and violence that are mounting in the world today. Wherever there is oppression and suffering, may your Spirit bring hope. Be with all who call upon your name and enable us all to be makers of peace and bearers of hope. And may there be fulfilled soon and in our days the words of the prophet Isaiah. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, nor shall they learn war anymore. The one who is called the Prince of Peace sits enthroned in the heavenly realms as anticipated by the rabbis of old. And we enter that throne room scene now as we respond on pages 40 and 41 with Elohim Asher.
האלוהים אשר דיבר מקדם פעמים רבות ובדרכים רבות אל האבות ויד הנביאים דיבר עלינו באחרית הימים האלה ביד הבן אשר שם לאור אשכול ובידו גם עשה את העולמים וזוהר כבודו וצלם עצמותו ונושא כל בדברו רב הגבורה ולך שעשה טיהור חטאים ישב לימין הגדולה. In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets, at many times in various ways. But now, in the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority, beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
As we turn to our Amida portions for this evening, the abridged and summary sections on pages 60 to 63. We request that God will direct our hearts to his worship. The Hebrew term for direct our hearts literally is circumcise our hearts, shape our hearts so that we respond to him. As we do, in fact, anticipate the flourishing of the throne of David, your servant, and the lengthening of the light of your Messiah. So we anticipate his return. And now we rise, we face Jerusalem, and then the direction of the ark, and then we utilize these words. First paragraph quietly, next several paragraphs we do responsively. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Ha'el HaGadol, HaGibor, v'Hanora, El Elyon, Konei Shemayim, v'Aretz. Blessed are you, O Lord our God and God of our ancestors. You're the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah. You are the great, the mighty, the revered God. You are the Most High God who is master of heaven and of earth.
Magin avot bidvaro, mechaye metim b'ma'amaro, ha'el hakadosh ein kamohu, המניח לעמו ביום שבת קדושו. כי בעם רצה להניח להם, לפניו נעבוד ביראה ואף אחת, ונודה לשמו בכל יום. תמיד מעין הברכות אל ההודעות אדון השלום, מקדש השבת ומברך שביעי, ומניח בקדושה לימדו שני עונג. זכר למעשה, למעשה וראשית. זכר למעשה, למעשה וראשית. He, with his word, was a shield to our forefathers, and by his voice will raise the dead. The holy God, like whom there is none, who gives rest to his people on his holy Sabbath day, because he delights in them to grant them rest. Before his presence we will serve with fear and awe. Daily and constantly we will thank him with the appropriate praises. He is the God to whom thanksgiving is due, the Lord of peace, who hallows the Sabbath and blesses the seventh day, and in holiness gives rest to a people filled with delights and remembrance of the creation.
And so, our God and God of our ancestors, we ask that you would accept our rest. Hallow us by your commandments, grant our portion in your Torah, satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, purify our hearts to serve you truthfully, and in your love and favor, O Lord our God, let us inherit your holy Sabbath. And may Israel, who sanctify your name, rest thereon. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. You may be seated. At its heart, the Amidah is not only, how shall we put it, a prayer, an expectation of request, but it is in fact an expression of gratitude. And that expression now continues as we join on pages 4 to 7 with Half Kaddish.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמך רבה, בעמד יפרח חירותי, וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון וחיית כל בית ישראל, בגלה ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעול בעולמי יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה לעילה מן כל ברכתה וסירתה תוספחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. Let his name be glorified and sanctified throughout the universe which he created according to his purpose. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom in your lifetime and in your days, and in the lifetime of all the house of Israel, speedily, soon, and let all say, Amen. Let his great name be praised forever and ever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, magnified and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, although he is far greater than all blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world, and all say, Amen.
Far greater than all the blessings, hymns, praises, and songs which are offered in the world, which is why we now continue on that theme as we respond with Mika Moko. Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Pages 44 and 45, the middle of those pages. As we respond, praise our exalted God. Blessed is he who is to be blessed. Moses and the people of Israel sang a song to you with great joy. As they all said, now we all say together,
Who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, glorious in holiness, awesome in praises, doing wonders? Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norat ahilot osef elei. Mi kamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh, norat ahilot osef elei.
questions need answers. And so we answer that question as Jacob leads us on pages 88 and 89 with Ein Kamocha as we stand and respond.
Ein chamocha ba'elim Adonai, ein chamocha nedar b'chodesh, norat ahilot osef elei, osef elei. There is none like you among the gods, my Lord, and there is nothing that compares to your deeds. Your kingdom is a kingdom that endures for all eternity, and your sovereignty extends throughout all generations. Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. The Lord reigns, the Lord has reigned, the Lord shall reign throughout eternity. The Lord will bless his people with peace.
The Lord shall reign throughout all eternity. He also needs to reign throughout all of our lives, every part of our lives. And so we make that our affirmation that that's what we want as we respond on pages 34 to 39, as we face Jerusalem again, and we respond with the Shema.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Legolam Va'ed. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידך, והיו לטוטפות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
The Lord shall reign throughout eternity, we said just a few minutes ago, and now we want him to reign in our lives. We look forward to the time when both those realities will in fact take place. Pages 88 and 89 anticipates that time with Vayi ben Soa, when, as the text tells us, from Zion will go forth the Torah and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem.
ויהי בנשוא אהרון ויאמר משה קום אדוני ויפוצו אויביך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני מירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל בקדושתו. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel. Mi shebarach avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak, veYaakov. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Alex, may he bless John, and may he bless Jenny, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruchu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamborach leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Bless the Lord who is blessed. Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Vayikra el Moshe vaydaber Adonai elav me'ohel moed lemor. דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת עליהם, אדם כי יקריב מכם קרבן לאדוני מן הבהמה, מן הבקר ומן הצאן, תקריבו את קרבנכם. אם עולה קרבנו מן הבקר, זכר תמים, יקריבנו אל פתח אוהל מועד, יקריב אותו, לרצונו לפני אדוני. ושמח ידו על ראש העולה, ונרצה לו לכפר עליו. You may be seated. I'm so excited. Okay, sorry. Did you guys see the big smile on my face? Okay. The Lord, okay, so first of all, generally, along these portions, the parshas start out pretty similarly, like Vayikra Adonai El Moshe Lemor, blah, blah, all that kind of stuff. This one is a little bit different. You probably heard me say that. So it starts off with Vayikra, which is calling. So the Lord is calling to Moses, and he spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, speak to the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, whenever a person brings an offering, basically offers an offering, brings an offering to the Lord from the animals, you shall bring, or you shall offer your offering from the herd or from the flock. Okay. If his offering is a burnt offering, an olah offering from the herd, it shall be. You shall bring it a male without defect, so perfect, no blemishes. You shall bring it to the opening of the tent of meeting. You shall bring it, and he shall be accepted before the Lord, and he shall lay his hand on the head of the olah, the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him. And here's that word KPR. We get the root word that we get from the word kippur. Rabbi Patrice did a wonderful drash on that a few weeks ago. So if you didn't catch that, make sure you catch that. I'm not going to talk about that here. So yes, here we are. Yay! We're in Vayikra. We're in Leviticus. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful place to be at, I think. Still one of my most favorite books of the scripture. Not my only favorite book, but it is one of my favorites. Rabbi John set us up last week wonderfully. I thought he was going to get into it, but he didn't. Yay. With the ending of Shemot, Exodus. As it ends, we finished building the Mishkan, right? With our own hands, we were able to partake in that. We were honored with that task to be able to build it with our own hands. And so we saw at the end literally God's presence residing in the Mishkan. It's the most beautiful sight. I just hope I can see it one day. Rewind the tapes, as Patrice says. So that's how it ends. And so here it is, the continuation, right, of Shemot, of Exodus. Just happens to be a new named book. But it's the continuation because we have to know how to act once the God of the universe has come and dwelled within our encampment, right? There are certain things that we have to do correctly because here the most holy of holy beings is now in our presence. And there's certain ways that we have to act and there's certain things that we have to do. And us just being the mundane people that we are, coming in contact with the most holy. So here is Vayikra. It's going to set us up for a wonderful experience over the next few months. And I am very happy to say that Daniel Dudley, who is doing his bar mitzvah next week, is his parsha, of course, is in Vayikra, and I am so proud of him. He has worked so hard, and I know he's going to give us a great little drosh next week, and it's the most perfect piece that he could have picked to do his parsha, or his bar mitzvah from. So I'm very excited to share that with y'all next week too. So Shabbat Shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam notza b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
He is, in fact, the one who gave us the Torah. He spoke from Sinai. Here he speaks from the Mishkan, but he speaks to us. And we now need to respond. And as we do, we turn to pages 98 and 99. Vizot HaTorah. We acknowledge that this comes from him. And we do what our ancestors did when they acknowledged it and responded. We stand. If you need a transliteration, you'll find it on page 95.
V'zot haTorah asher sam Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai ve'ad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. And now we continue our response with Etz Chaim, pages 96 and 97. Reminds us of that important reality that we need to acknowledge that these are words that need to impact our lives, taking root in our lives like a tree, the tree of life that it is. Pages 96 and 97, Etz Chaim.
Etz Chaim hi lamachazekim ba v'tomchei ha'meushar derachei ha'darchei noam v'chol nativotei ha'shalom. Hashevenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Chadesh yamenu kikedem. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva. Chadesh yamenu kikedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
Given all that, we are now better equipped to stand as his priests in his presence, which we now do. And we respond in pages 98 and 99 with Uvnucho Yomar.
Uvnucho Yomar, Shuva Adonai Rivavot Zalfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, You and your mighty ark, clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avor David avdecha al teshev pnei mishikecha. Ki lechach tov natati lechem, torati al ta'azovu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
And I give you good instruction, do not forsake greeting one another.
Shabbat shalom, Rabbi.
A number of weeks ago, I began a series on some of the names and titles of God. We interrupted that for a couple reasons along the way that had to do with how we come before God and how he comes to us. And of course, last week's portion helped us better understand the nature of this God that we've been looking at, as will tonight's section as well. And then, of course, the series will be interrupted yet again next week with the Bar Mitzvah, and then the week after that with Passover, and the week after that with Yom HaAtzmaut, and the week after that with Yom HaShoah. So it'll be a few weeks before we get back to the names and titles of God to enable us to better understand him and how we can better interact with him. But tonight is a very interesting story. For a story that began with the promise of intimacy, as Exodus did, we would have hoped for a happier ending. Well, consider the verses that are at the end of the book of Exodus that were referenced last week and again this week. So Moses completed the work, and then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the sanctuary, the special place. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of meeting. He was not able to enter into the tent of meeting because the cloud was over it, and the glory of the Lord filled that divine dwelling, that sacred space, however you want to translate that. Now look, these verses are the climax of numerous chapters chronicling, if you would have it, a budding romance between God and the people of Israel, whom he was taking as his bride. In a sense, beginning in sort of a fairy tale manner, God took notice of this damsel in distress, Israel, and rescued the nation from the hands of an oppressive master. Then God and Israel encountered one another on a mountaintop just outside the point of rescue, where they exchanged their eternal vows. That was the marriage ceremony as envisioned by the rabbis of old. And at the height of the romance, God said, "Make me a sanctuary that I might reside or live among them." Exodus 25. And the people, not unexpectedly, responded with the full force of a love interest, longing for that moment of stability and connection that would come at the culmination of the construction of God's special space or divine dwelling among us. And so they built God's house. But just at the very moment in the Parsha when Moses and his team finish building this sacred space, this special house, God settles into it, and Moses is compelled to wait outside as a representative of the people. Why can't Moses enter? Well, he just encountered God face to face on Mount Sinai, right in the middle of that same cloud that had descended on the tent of meeting here. So why can't Moses enter and be with God? Well, the expectation that Moses might enter into the tent with God stems from perhaps something akin to our deepest longings and prayer. The Psalms are filled with the repetition of this basic yearning that we may, to quote Psalm 23 and Psalm 27 to cite a couple, so that we may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of our lives. So this drama at the end of the book of Exodus might well be the moment of anticipation, then, to which the psalmist looks back. But what does the story tell us? Moses and the people could not go in. This was to be their honeymoon home. In his commentary on Exodus, Nachmanides, the great rabbi, the Ramban, 12th or 13th century, if I think about it long enough, I'll figure out which one, agreed that the Torah's explanation of why Moses couldn't enter is insufficient by itself. And he wrote, and the reason is that he could not enter without permission. But if God were to call him, then he may come into the cloud just like he did on Mount Sinai. It's not enough to say that Moses couldn't enter because the cloud had descended and the presence of God was in this special place. This would not have been the first time, you see, that Moses would be directly in the presence of God, nor would it be the last. The difference here is that Moses had not been invited in. He was as yet not called, Vayikra. Now, some important background. Normally, when God speaks to Moses, the Torah employs the Hebrew verbs amar or davar. But on several occasions, he uses a more special or a more striking word. Let's use it that way. The first Vayikra comes at the burning bush. Moses is in the wilderness. He's tending to the flock of his father-in-law, Yitro, when he sees a bush burning without being consumed by the fire. And the text says, God called out to him from the middle of the bush, and he said, Moses, Moses. And Moses replied, Hineni, here I am. More on that later. The second Vayikra appears twice at Mount Sinai. As soon as Israel arrived at the mountain, the text says, Moses went up to God, and Vayikra elav, the Lord called to him from the mountain. And again, after the Lord speaks the 10 words, or the 10 commandments as they're frequently known, as well as the first series of instructions to Moses, and the people agree to obey them, as we did as well, Moses goes back up to the mountain to receive the stone tablets. And the text says, Moses ascended the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord rested upon Mount Sinai. Vayikra el Moshe, and he called to Moses from the middle of that cloud. As we consider that, we can see that God desires to bring Moses near. He calls across the distance of his majesty and his awesomeness. The glory cloud, as it were, keeps Moses at a distance. The voice of God calls him near. This same dynamic is at work at the burning bush. God appears to Moses as transcendent and awe-inspiring. The fire of God keeps him at a distance, but the voice of God calls to him across the distance. This is holy ground, but God calls Moses into a dialogue with himself. Likewise at Sinai, the appearance is awesome. The glory cloud covers that mound of majesty, covers the mountain, and no one can approach. But the voice of God calls to Moses to come near, and he gives him the instructions that will guide Israel from that point on. It's no surprise, then, that the very next word in the Torah, after this final passage of Exodus, is in fact Vayikra. The sequel to Exodus, then, is a book about the invitation to be close to God. Vayikra, the book being called, is the story of life's day-to-day routine, if you would have it, of rituals and the messiness that comes along with that. Once again, according to Nachmanides, the Ramban, Vayikra is the real love story here. The moments when humans will actually live in the presence, in the house of the Lord. Intimacy, then, is to be found in the daily details of Leviticus. Now, our learning here is perhaps somewhat jarring and poignant. You see, we need to adjust the paradigm of our relationship to God. God is not a genie whose favor we can conjure up through the performance of mitzvot. God is a complicated lover, and mitzvot are not a currency to exchange for God's favor, but they are the language of love with which we speak to God. We don't perform them in order to merit divine encounters, but rather to understand one another when those encounters arise, and when we get to experience the daily flow of life that he's so much a part of, and the brachot, the blessings, are a reminder of. Moreover, the central focus of Vayikra is on establishing a sacred community. Remember, we were called a nation of priests whose daily deeds were intended to perfect the world under God's rule. By establishing an ideal community, Vayikra recognizes that deeds speak far more eloquently than words, that living in a holy community can provide a sense of God's presence far more pervasive than some sort of ethereal or spiritual kind of approaches. Did you catch that? The importance of community is central to this book. That's why it's so important for us as a community to get together on a regular basis, on Shabbat, on other days as well. Did I lay a guilt trip on you? I hope so. Now, for modern Jews, few modern Jews would have any problem, at least in theory, with those general remarks that I've made. Our problem starts when we examine how Vayikra defines the detailed practices of this sacred community. What kinds of deeds and activities create the core of Vayikra's vision? Well, at the center of this central book, and it is in the very center of the Torah, the scroll, at the center lies a preoccupation with what? With animal and vegetable sacrifice, which is far from the worldview of most contemporary Jews and, in fact, most contemporary Americans. When we think of religious devotion, what do we think of? We tend to picture silent meditation, appreciation of nature, perhaps even a commitment to ethical living. But the connection between killing animals and serving the Lord escapes us completely. Now, to understand our sacred heritage as Jews and those who've joined with us in community, to appreciate the religious perspective that emerges from the Torah, the Talmud, and most later Jewish writings, we must come to an understanding of the centrality of the temple ritual and sacrifice. Look, objections to animal sacrifice readily abound. Look, it's bloody, it's barbaric, it's primitive, it's too physical, it's too particular, it's too ugly. Pick a response. Sacrifice is violent, uncontrolled, and primitive. All true, but guess what? So also is life. And it's precisely in that kind of a paradox that we can first recognize the power, if not to some degree the aesthetics, of sacrifice. And so God instructs Moses, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, and this text was read to you, when a person among you brings an offering to the Lord, you shall bring your offering of the livestock and of the flock, and so forth. Now, the word for offering here, and I'm glad, Jenny, you didn't focus on this and steal my thunder. The word for offering here is korban, the root karav, meaning to come or to be near. Through the offering, then, the children of Israel can come near to God, even though his holiness might keep them at a distance. In fact, the root karav appears twice in this one verse, because it also forms the verb translated as bring, and Jenny was sort of playing around with how to translate that. So literally our verse says, when a person among you brings near a near offering. So the offering then itself bridges the distance between a person and God, because it is in fact korban, that which comes near. And a person must come near in order to present it. We're about to begin Passover very shortly. You may not be aware of the fact, but you should be, that the goal of the Exodus from Egypt, as God announced it in Exodus 8:2, is worship. He said that they might come to my holy mountain and worship me. Why then does the Torah too many thens. Why then does the Torah seem to make worship so difficult in the book of Leviticus? It's our understanding, let me suggest, that's at fault. You see, the rules of the offering do not make worship more difficult, rather, they make it possible. There's a vast gulf between humans and God. God calls us through his representative Moses across that gulf to provide a way for people to draw close to him. How different is this understanding of the sacrificial system of Leviticus from typical modern views? We tend to see the elaborate requirements and regulations of sacrifice as creating an unnecessary distance between people and their God. But in the context of the Torah, of the altar, of the sacrifices, and the priesthood, all that is precisely the opposite. The Levitical system is given not to impose or maintain the distance, but to bring us near. Now, back to the beginning of the book, because there's so many layers and levels here. The very first word in the book, of course, is, as was read to you, Vayikra. The Hebrew name for the book is precisely this word, which means God called. When the rabbis characterize this book by its opening word, it is no longer just a book then about the priesthood or about the Ikki. Instead, it becomes a book about calling. So, just what does it mean to have a calling? The very concept, to many people, actually sounds somewhat Gentile. I mean, isn't calling something that Christians have before they enter the clergy or become clergy? But we Jews are also called, as are those who've joined with us. In fact, the Midrash on this book, Leviticus Rabbah, wonders what's so special about God calling Moses. I mean, after all, God called Adam and Eve. God called Noah. God called Abraham and Sarah. And God called Moses in the book of Exodus, as we've looked at it already, all the way back to the burning bush. So why do we now have the language of calling as an introduction to all of the Levitical rules? Well, for the answer, we need to go back to that original calling of Moses, Moses' original Vayikra in Exodus chapter 3. And as we understand that text, we get the lesson that is intended from that text. As we hear his response, I promised this to you when we first read it, his response is Hineni. In other words, at your service, Lord. But there's more. The opening word of Leviticus signals to Moses that to truly be God's messenger, to heed God's call, he needs to shrink a bit. Again, Jenny was kind enough not to remark on the fact that the opening word, and I've enlarged it here on the top of this page, Vayikra, you'll notice the opening word ends in a very small aleph. All kinds of interesting things as to why it's an aleph. I wish I had the time to go into that, but that's all part of another story. I told you there are many layers in this story. But the letter is shrunk, so the message appears to be, at least in part, to heed God's call. Moses needs to shrink a bit, to be like that small aleph. And that Moses understood this and integrated into his life, we learn from Numbers chapter 12, verse 3, where the text says, that man Moses was very humble. He learned the lesson of his calling. In other words, how to be a little aleph. It's a lesson we need to learn as well. So, speaking of us, how about you? God is calling you to draw closer. God has given you a calling, and what should your response be? Well, follow Moses' pattern, and that includes the response, Hineni, at your service, Lord. Take the next minute or so for a time of quiet reflection and choose your response carefully. In quiet. In keeping with the book, Vayikra, and the Drash, God invites us closer. The Elenu tells us on pages 102 to 107 something about our calling. It is to be our task as we anticipate the time when God brings all things to completion, when the world will be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty. Some of you started standing. That's perfectly all right. The rest of you stand as we respond, facing Jerusalem yet again on pages 102 to 107 with the Elenu.
עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשינו כגוי הארצות, ולא שמענו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגבי מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשב אותה אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. It is incumbent upon us to praise the Master of all, to exalt the Creator of the world, for He has made us distinct from the nations and unique among the families of the earth. Our destiny is not like theirs. Our calling is our task. We bow down and acknowledge before the King of Kings that there is none like Him, for He stretched forth the heavens like a tent and established the earth. Truly there is none like our Lord and King. As the Torah says, you shall know this day and reflect in your heart that it is the Lord who is God in the heavens above, and on the earth beneath there is none else. We hope, O Lord our God, to soon behold your majestic glory, when all abominations shall be removed, and all false gods shall be at an end. Then shall the world be perfected under the rule of the Lord Almighty, and all mankind shall call upon your name. For to you every knee must bow, and every tongue declare that you are God. Reign over us soon and forever. May the kingdom of David's greater Son be established forever. For then shall the words be fulfilled, the Lord shall be king forever, and the Lord shall be king over all the earth. On that day the Lord shall be one, and his name one. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
You may be seated, and you will have noticed that the curtain for the ark decided tonight that it wants to remain open a little longer. As you have noticed, some of our key players are not here with us tonight, our A team, so to speak. So you get me. So for the news of the week, the news of the community, I don't have a bulletin in front of me, so somebody check me Oh, okay, well, I was going to say you didn't have to bring it up. You just needed to check me to make sure I covered everything. All right, what's coming up? Well, we start with tomorrow night. Stump the Stars, Jewish style, 7 o'clock in that other room. We'd love to see you there, or by all means, join us virtually. Now, for this to be a truly special evening together, and for us, Dr. Patrice and I, to look specifically or especially good, you need to give us your questions in advance so we can have some intelligent answers to those questions. Email us at stumpthestars@gmail.com. Okay, that's tomorrow night. Next week, you already heard the announcement. It's bar mitzvah time. Those are always amazing times. And for those of you who are not familiar with the Dudley family, they were for many years a part of our community. They had to move away, but they remained a part of our community and continued being connected virtually as well as through bar and bat mitzvah classes, thanks to Jenny. So we will all celebrate together next week. Let's see. Upcoming events. Yeah, Passover's coming along, and you know along with Passover comes what? The resurrection service, Hag HaTkiah. 11 o'clock, what is that, April 9th? Congregations around the world tend to utilize this celebration as a sunrise service, but as you're familiar with the fact, we here at Congregation Ohr Chadash, for us, the sun will rise promptly at 11 o'clock in the morning. That's a special kind of daylight savings time. Yeah, I see a couple people agreeing with that wholeheartedly. All right, and then the holidays or the commemorations will continue in coming weeks. We'll keep you posted as far as that's concerned. One of those commemorations, of course, is the celebration of Passover. Now, we will actually be here on that Friday of Passover week, much to our surprise, because for most of the last several years, the first night of Passover fell on Friday. This time, that's not the case. So we will have a service in connection with Passover here. But you will need some, how should I put it? You will need a community or a family or so to celebrate Passover with. And if you don't have one that's already part of your extended family, tap someone on the shoulder and say, hey, you want to be part of my extended family? Let's put together a Passover. Kerry. Okay. All right. So if you don't have a place to go, now you have a place to go. Go talk to Kerry. In order to be prepared for that, we have two important Vimeos or recordings, and you find those listed in the bulletin as part of the insert. Pointing toward Passover is Dr. Patrice's session on helping us all prepare for Passover, not only physically, with the stuff that's necessary, but also, I was going to say, yeah, educationally, so we can better understand some of the lessons that are part of the preparation as far as the Passover itself. And then hearing the Haggadah is simply me going through the Haggadah and highlighting some of the things, and what we use is a traditional Haggadah, not a Messianic one, but to highlight the things that are inherently Messianic in the traditional Haggadah. So that's what those two things are there. And you don't need to buy Haggadahs for your Seder, as the insert also reminds us. And I noticed that there are some Haggadahs that have been put on the back table as well. So you don't need to be left out. Now, speaking of being left out, did I leave out any news, upcoming news for us? Okay, nobody's rushing to correct me, then I'll very quickly stop. And with that being said, let me say to those of you who've joined us virtually, thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us in this experience of the God of the universe in this special encounter called Shabbat. And we look forward to seeing you again, not only tomorrow night, but